This meeting is being recorded.
Awesome.
All right,
well,
so take it away, Nathan.
Is the recording for all the members at church to watch?
Yeah, we put it on the YouTube channel. Yeah.
I will refrain from cursing or anything bad.
Oh, actually, we probably prefer if you
yeah, free speech. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to be with you all again. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you've had a good week, and we're excited to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can get started. I teach virtually, so I should be able to do this. I hope that's the case. Are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, great. So welcome. This is our second week of the Lent Book Club. We are studying Henri Nouwen, Spiritual Direction. As you all know, I think everybody on here was with us last week, so we can sort of dispense with some of the preliminary things. But just like last week, we are going to do a brief roundup this week of the two chapters, Chapter 3, Who Am I? And Chapter 4, Where Have I Been and Where Have I Been Going? So, you know, they were really light, easy reads this week, right? So we'll do a summary of what we read this week, what was discussed, and then we'll have a brief whole group discussion. And we thought that we'd once again break into the Zoom breakout rooms. That seemed to go well last week. Again, please feel free anytime. Let Pastor Aaron or myself know your thoughts on that. We love to hear your feedback. So, but that seemed to go well last week. So we thought we'd try that again, and then we'll wrap up by 8:30. So we're so glad you're here. Just remember, if anybody in the community is asking about this, please feel free to let them know. You know, even if you don't read the book, come. You know, we love to have you, and we provide a summary. We don't want that to be a barrier to anybody. People are able to participate as much or as little as they are comfortable with, and we'd love to hear your voice. So I'd like us to start this evening by inviting us once again into a minute of silence to sort of settle in and center ourselves as we prepare to discuss some of these spiritual issues. So I invite everybody into a minute of silence. Amen. All right, so this week we're going to discuss chapters 3 and chapter 4 from Spiritual Direction. We'll do a quick overview of what was discussed. So chapter 3, the theme was Who Am I? Which is a big question. And Henri Nouwen tells us in chapter 3 that this question of who am I resurfaces over and over again throughout our lives. It's not as we discussed last week, it's not a one-time thing, right? He invites us to live these questions continuously throughout the entirety of our lives. And oftentimes the questions lead to more questions. But he says that this question of who am I resurfaces again and again throughout our life. He says that the ultimate spiritual temptation is to doubt that we are the beloved of God. His core identity is rooted in being God's beloved. In fact, he talks about Jesus being tempted and says that when Satan tempted Jesus in the desert, the temptation was to doubt Jesus's identity. And we know that Jesus lived into that identity, spoke into that identity, and knew who he was. And so Nouwen says that we oftentimes believe three lies about ourselves. The first lie being, I am what I do, right? So our identity is rooted in our job, right? Or in what we do for other people. I know that this resonated for me, especially leaving a job where I was very attached to my identity and moving into another one where I don't quite know who I am anymore, to be honest. Even though my old job was very chaotic and stressful, I knew who I was in that environment. I was the steady one. I was the one that showed up every day and offered myself to the students. And when you don't have that, it can be difficult to navigate. So he says that the first lie that we tell ourselves in answer to this question, who am I, is I am what I do. He says the second lie is I am what others say about me. And we've been talking a lot at Hot Metal during Lent about voices, right? And all the different voices that are constantly speaking into our lives. And it's easy to believe those voices because they're pretty persistent sometimes. And so the second lie is believing what other people say about you. And the third lie is believing I am what I have, right? So identity rooted in possessions, right? I have to have this certain thing, this status, right? This certain brand of whatever, identity rooted in possessions. One quote that stood out to me from chapter 3 was when Nouwen says that self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that declares we are loved. And I'll read that just one more time. It says, self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that declares we are loved. I just found that to be powerful. So a question for us to ponder from chapter 3 was, in what areas of your life are you prone to self-rejection? And he said that, these lies, I am what I do, right? I am what others say about me. I am what I have. They come about because we reject our own belovedness, right? And so we go looking for that validation in other things, whether it's a job, whether it's a possession, whether it's people saying that we're really nice or kind, whatever it might be. So that's where the self-rejection stems from. So that was a summary of chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where have I been and where am I going? And this was a really interesting chapter. It was sort of Nouwen's history, his personal story with God. And he says that we all have one. And so there's an invitation here to explore our own story with God, our own history with God. And he starts off the chapter by saying that there is a tension that we all probably face between two voices, right? And the first voice says, become something, make something of yourself, right? And the second voice says, stay true to your source and stick to your vocation and your calling. And so throughout our lives, there's sort of this tension between what society tells us, right, to make something of yourself, and that inner voice that tells us to stay close to the heart of God. And then Nouwen talks about his time in L'Arche, which is a community in Toronto where caretakers lived in community with the physically disabled. And it was a very powerful story. He talks about a patient named Adam who he took care of for almost 10 years. And he didn't really know what he was doing at first. Adam had difficulty communicating and speaking. And so Nouwen says that he never really knew what was happening in Adam's mind or in Adam's heart. And so he just had to kind of show up every day and love Adam. And he says that Adam taught him a lot of important things. And the first thing that Adam taught him was that being is more important than doing, which is a lesson that I have had to learn over and over again. Being is more important than doing. The second lesson from Adam that Nouwen learned was that the heart is more important than the mind. And the third, and this is especially important for a community such as Hot Meadow, right, is that doing things together is more important than doing them alone. And Nouwen, I love the picture that he started the chapter with. He said that when he was teaching his students, he was a professor for many years, he would have a piece of chart paper or a chalkboard. He would draw a line across, from left to right. And he said that whole that whole line was our relationship with God. And then he would draw just like a little sliver in the middle. And he would say, that's like the 60 to 70 years that maybe 80 or 90 years that we're alive, right? Just that little sliver. And he said that God loved us before we were born, and God loves us, even after we die. And, he says that little sliver, that life is just a short opportunity to say to God, I love you too. And I thought that was powerful. And so the question to think about from chapter 4 was, how has a period of, either discontent or dealing with a challenging person, like he talked about Adam, changed your life? In Nouwen's case, dealing with Adam showed him these universal and profound truths that he never expected to find. And so, the idea, of course, is to always have eyes to see and ears to hear, even in a world that's chaotic and noisy, and it's hard to do that. So that was a summary for chapter 4, and so that was chapters 3 and 4. And so for our whole group discussion tonight, one of the exercises in chapter 3 is taking 5 minutes and writing 2 sentences about who am I and what that says about what you value. So I thought that we would take a few minutes tonight to write down our answer to that question. And might be a lengthy process, right? We might not be able to figure all of this out in 5 minutes, but this can be a starting point, right? And so I thought we could take 5 minutes, think about this question, who am I? And of course, for me, it's going to be hard to limit it to 2 sentences because I feel like I'm a lot of things. But after 5 minutes, if anybody is willing, and you certainly don't have to, but if anybody would be willing to share those sentences, we could take some time to do that. Or if not, that's okay too. This could just be a starting point for you, on a journey of reflection and figuring out, spiritually speaking, who are you? So does that make sense? Sound good? Okay, awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and put 5 minutes on. I'll put some music on as well. Feel free to mute us if that music is annoying, but some people work better with music, some people might not. So we'll take 5 minutes. Does 5 minutes seem like a good amount of time for this? Okay, sounds good. We'll start with that, and then we'll come back together after 5 minutes.
Nathan, I don't know that the music's coming through, but.
Oh, thank you. I need to
You might
share.
have to.
Thank you. All right, everyone. That was about 5 minutes. Is there anyone that might benefit from another minute or so? Or are we all good? Okay, cool. All right. Well, please feel free to keep working if you if you feel like you need to. So at this time, I'd like to invite us to sort of begin to share out. And I think what we could do is I'd like to invite everyone to either share out what you wrote down for Who Am I? Or if you don't want to share out what you wrote down, maybe share how you felt during that exercise. Was that easy for you to do? Was that difficult for you to do? Was it stressful because you had to boil down your entire existential identity in 5 minutes? Maybe, right? It's not easy to do. So maybe just share either your response, what you wrote for Who Am I, or how you felt as you attempted that exercise.
I came up, I've thought about this for a long time. And so I'll tell you the two sentences I wrote as to who I am. I'm Jesus's favorite, and I'm Karen's husband. I see myself, okay. I see myself, my whole being is relational. I am with through relation with others. I mean, if another person is diminished, so am I. Another person lifted up, so am I. So and they just those two just leap. Those two just leap to me. I used to have a T-shirt that said, "Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite." And I wore it we were down in North Carolina on the Outer Banks, and we stopped in one of those places to get information, an information center. And then a lady behind the desk nearly came across the desk at me, said that was just terrible. That I said I declared that I was Jesus's favorite. And I remember telling her, I said, if she couldn't say the same thing about herself, she needed to work on the relationship a little bit. So we became friends after that.
Thanks, John. That's cool.
Mine was similar to John's. Hey, John, do you say that about your parents too, that you're their favorite?
That just goes without saying. Don't ask my sister that question.
So for me, the first one I put, I am a child of God. And then the second one I put, I am part of a community. And I think all of that drives everything that I do, those two things. So like some subcategories I put down, to be loving, to be gracious, to be a witness. And I thought I might be different for being part of a community, but it ended up being the same. And then it's some other things as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Michael.
What I had very similar, and I'm Michael. Spaced that right out. Sorry, Michael. Very similar to Michael. I said I am a grateful child of God, and then I got into like adjectives for how I felt, which isn't the same as who am I. I said I am both serene and discombobulated. But that's feelings. So then I gave it another shot. I said, I am a mother, a seeker, and a giver. That's what I got. There's a lot more that can be thought of and said, and we could all spend days in our own heads on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Annette.
So I just, I'm freshly retired. And one of the things that struck me the first few days of retirement was, this is the first time in, goodness, almost 50 years that I don't have a business card. And, that's an identifier, right? I still have a driver's license and I still pay taxes, but I don't have that signifier, that identifier that's related to what I do. And so my understanding of who I am has always been inextricable from the work, but now it is extricated. And so it, I would echo what others have said, that it's hard to imagine who I am apart from relationships with my family, with my wife, my parents, my kids, my neighbors. But one relationship that sort of stood out to me as I was thinking, it's a relational term, but it's the term child. And I certainly am the child of a family, but I'm also the child of a tradition. I'm the child of a people, of a nation. And that sense of having been formed by the place that birthed me is very significant to me as I think about who I am. And of course, as every child does, we both live into and resist what has been given to us. And so it's both a matter of accepting and resisting.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was out a little bit while the first sharing went on, but here's what I had come up with during those 5 minutes. That first of all, I thought I am a middle child. I was the black sheep of the family, but I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, and I just feel so blessed in my entire life through God's grace. Just that I'm just so surprised that as I look back on life that I am still here, still living, and just have wonderful wife, wonderful family. So truly, I've been really blessed. I think a lot of my identity is through family. I identify a lot with, my father, mother, sisters, brothers, immediate family now. So I think I find a lot of my identity right in that area.
I had, I think, a similar experience to Annette's, that I kept coming up with feeling words like, I am tired. I am right. And so that it took me a minute to set those aside and shift through and say, okay, but what is at the core? What is temporary and what is permanent? What is important? So right. So there are many ways, if you just make it a sentence to fill in the blank, I am blank. There's so many different ways that could go. and only a few, like, I think, fit what Nouwen is inviting us to embrace about ourselves.
I will share mine, but just fair warning, I'm feeling emotional. And that's just what's going to happen. So leaky. I am Joni Renee Smith Watson. I'm a caregiver, a fixer of problems, and a sponge who soaks up and absorbs the feelings of everyone I'm around to help, impress, or please. And I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter, and a sister. This is a question that speaks to a very big part of my journey. Probably has a lot to do with losing a father at a very young age. That identity piece is big. And I really loved chapter 3. I read it over and over and over. To claim that I am a beloved child of God was very impactful. It's not a new message. I've heard it all my life, but it's truly been resonating this week. And I found that a lot of the things that I wanted to write for Who Am I were more of what I want to be or what I wish I was. And so I had to keep going back, like, so I guess that means I'm kind of discontented, but very much wanting to be more of something. I don't know. It's a very reflective chapter, very impactful for me. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
I wish there was a way to give hugs on Zoom.
I'd take it.
This is for me, but also for you, Joni. I am learning to be God's beloved. I think we do need a group hug. And I'm also, the second part was I'm learning to be a part of God's beloved and learning how to love those who disagree with me. The tricky thing when you haven't been taught that you're his beloved with your family.
Mm. I think what you're both pointing to is this question of self-rejection. And Ethan, thanks for pulling that out for us, because I do this too all the time. I'm like, oh, sure, I am beloved. Like literally my first sentence was beloved, but, and I was like, I just negated all that. Like, and so, yeah, so how can we hold the truth about ourselves, God's truth about, that God knows is true about us, which is that we're beloved, like conditionally, but with the fact that we're also imperfect. And how can we be okay with that imperfection and not have it negate the belovedness? Yeah. Annette,
just maybe off topic a little bit. What you said really made me realize that, I grew up Catholic, so of course the cliche, which has a lot of truth to it, is, you know, guilt, guilt, guilt. But and I think this is true in other religions and in for sure other Christian religions, we are so encouraged to be humble. And I think that really messed with me from the time I was, you know, before I can remember. Just that, and my parents weren't the kind to say, you know, you're not any good, or like, you know, but just that message because I was paying attention, just that message, it's been something I've had to fight my entire life. And that's, you saying that just reminded me of that.
Yeah, lots of feminist and womanist theologians take this idea, right? So there's like this self submission idea, right? Or subservient idea that, right, like that gets talked about with Jesus, who became a servant. But when you layer that on with like layers and layers and layers of patriarchy that say, okay, not only should you be not only should you have a servant heart, you should be subservient, you should be self-rejecting in all the ways, right? Like, and it gets layered and layered and layered, especially for those of us who are socialized as women in this particular society. And so it carries, I think, a different weight for that. That invitation to not self-reject, I think, has a bigger weight lifted maybe for those of us who hear it, and a different impact for those of us who are socialized to say, oh, this is the way you do it. But I don't know.
I mean,
Nathan,
there's a place.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on, but there's a place for humility. That's what makes it a little bit complicated to me. There's a place for humility, but it was overtaught basically. And I think that's what you're saying too.
Yeah. And I was reminded of the activity that we did at Hot Metal a couple weeks ago, where we, I think, gave each other a hug and said, no matter what you've done, God loves you. And I've talked to a few people who felt that was very powerful. I know I felt that was very powerful, because Pastor Aaron, I resonated when you said, yes, I'm beloved, but there's times I honestly don't even get there, like thinking that I am beloved. I have, core belief that I'm not good enough. And it's very complicated in that there's so many layers to this, right? There's a lot of unpacking that I think we all need to do. And so we're going to get a chance to do that. This should be the perfect segue into our next portion of the evening. So I'll share my screen real quick, and we'll have an opportunity. I feel like we're really kind of getting going with the discussion there. So for those of you that are interested in continuing that, you will definitely have an opportunity to do that in just a minute. Last week, we tried the Zoom breakout rooms. We're going to try this again this week. We feel like it went pretty well. And so I want to just take a moment to kind of outline what the options will be for tonight. So once again, we'll have, let me move along here. So once again, we'll have a social discussion room where we can continue, either continue the discussion that we were having just a moment ago, or there's some other question prompts that can be explored as well. So for those of you that are interested in speaking and being social, this room is for you. The second room is we'll have a guided journaling room with some prompts. So for those of you that are interested in writing this evening, you have an opportunity to write, reflect, and get some thoughts down on paper, because sometimes a lot can be going on in your head, right? And it's helpful to, get it down in a tactile way. So we'll have a guided journaling room. And then the third room, this is the room that I'll be in. Pastor Aaron will be in the discussion room. But the third room is a guided contemplation room. So there's a contemplation at the end of chapter 3. It's called the Beloved Prayer. And so for those of you interested in the guided contemplation, we'll be going through the Beloved Prayer. Essentially, you take some time to remind yourself that you are the beloved and that you are part of a community of the beloved as well. So for those of you in room 1 and 2, if anybody is in need of question prompts to sort of guide or spark your thinking, we can continue talking about who am I, right? We can talk about, we started to have a really good discussion about self-rejection, so that can continue. Or like Nouwen does in chapter 4, you can kind of take a look at your history with God. And of course, you can go anywhere else that you need to as well. These are just prompts to guide in case anybody needs it. So we'll open up those breakout rooms. It is 8:16, so we'll say maybe 10 minutes this evening, and then we'll come back together. So yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask, but otherwise enjoy the time in your rooms, and we'll come back together as a group at 8:25.
This meeting is being recorded.
We did get cut off. Debbie worked for ATS.
The Association of Theological Schools. We're located here in Pittsburgh.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Sorry that we, had to cut it short, but just for the sake of time, I wanted to make sure to be respectful of everyone's time. But before we wrap up for tonight, once again, I just want to kind of ask, open the floor if there were any, major takeaways or anything to share with the group before we wrap up tonight. Okay, well, seeing none, I want to thank everyone once again for being here this evening. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Hopefully this is meaningful for you. Hopefully this gives you some things to think about and reflect on throughout the course of the week. And these are really big questions, right? So we are not going to get any simple, easy answers out of this in the span of, even 6 weeks or so. This is in many ways a lifelong process. So I encourage everyone to have grace with yourself. I encourage myself as a reminder to have grace with myself as we wrestle with and think through some of these major questions. But it's a pleasure to be with you all. Next week, we'll meet again on Tuesday, March 14th. We'll talk about chapter 5, what is prayer, and chapter 6, who is God for me. So again, just some nice light reading during Lent. So, but thank you, everybody. I'll hang around for a minute or two in case